The moment Chiamaka stepped off the plane, Seoul hit her like a wave of chaos and excitement. The city lights danced off the sleek glass buildings, reflecting her own mix of fear and anticipation. She adjusted the strap of her bag, gripping it a little tighter, and raced through the airport, her heart hammering not from exhaustion, but from a strange thrill she couldn't yet name. Her scholarship had brought her here, but she hadn't expected Seoul to feel so alive, so fast. She was late. She knew it. And that realization turned her sprint into a near run. Her shoes squeaked on the polished floors, drawing a few curious glances from hurried travelers. Finally, she reached the taxi line, panting, trying to steady her breath. "I'm going to be late on my first day," she muttered under her breath, adjusting her blazer. The taxi ride was a blur of neon signs and the hum of the city, and when she finally arrived at the prestigious school, the gates loomed like a challenge. Students streamed in, chatting in rapid Korean, laughing, and weaving effortlessly around one another. Chiamaka felt the familiar weight of being the outsider pressed down, but she squared her shoulders and stepped forward. Inside the school, she realized she wasn't just late, she was spectacularly late. Her classmates were already seated, whispering and giggling among themselves. Her teacher, a tall woman with sharp eyes, frowned at the interruption. "Ah, you must be Chiamaka," the teacher said, her Korean laced with a strange kindness. "Come, sit. Don't worry, it's just your first day." Chiamaka nodded, moving toward an empty desk near the window. That's when she noticed him. He was leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed, watching her with a faint, unreadable expression. Dark hair fell over his forehead in a way that looked deliberate, even though she knew it wasn't. He was impossibly handsome, the kind of boy who seemed to float above the chaos, observing it all without effort. Their eyes met for the briefest instant, and her stomach fluttered in a way that made her cheeks heat. Ji-hoon. That was his name, she would learn later. But at that moment, he was just impossible. Her first class started, and she tried to focus on the teacher's rapid-fire Korean explanations, but her mind kept drifting back to him. She caught him glancing her way a few times, and each time, she looked away, pretending to concentrate on her notes. During break, she navigated the crowded hallways with the grace of someone used to being invisible, trying not to trip or draw attention. That plan lasted all of 3 steps before she collided with someone broad and solid. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, looking up. He bent slightly to meet her eyes, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Careful," he said in Korean, his voice smooth and low. "You almost ruined my day." Chiamaka blinked, caught off guard. His English wasn't perfect, but it was enough. I'm really sorry," she stammered, her hands gripping her bag as if it were a lifeline. He tilted his head, studying her with a mix of amusement and curiosity. "You're new," he said finally, as if he had solved a puzzle. "I can tell." "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "First day." He extended a hand, and she hesitated for the fraction of a second before shaking it. That handshake, brief as it was, sent a thrill racing through her fingers. "I'm Ji-hoon," he said. "And you are?" "Chiamaka," she replied, smiling shyly. "Chiamaka," he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "It suits you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Thank you." There was a pause, a moment when the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them in the noisy hallway. Then the bell rang, and they were pulled apart by the tide of students moving to their next class. She found herself glancing back at him as she walked away, only to catch him doing the same. Later, during lunch, she sat alone under a tree outside, unpacking her small, neatly arranged lunch. She barely noticed the figure approaching until a shadow fell over her tray. "Mind if I sit?" Ji-hoon asked, the hint of a smile playing on his lips. Chiamaka shook her head, surprised. "Sure." He sat down without another word, opening his own lunch. The air between them was charged, the kind of quiet that made her pulse quicken. "You speak Korean?" she asked hesitantly. "Enough to survive," he said with a grin. "But I can teach you." Chiamaka felt her stomach flip at the offer. "You would do that?" "Why not?" he said, leaning slightly closer, his eyes locking onto hers in a way that made her breath catch. "You seem interesting." The word lingered in the air, heavy and full of promise. She wanted to laugh, to brush it off, but something in his gaze made her want to believe it. Interesting, she repeated, a teasing note creeping into her voice. He leaned back, smirking. Yes. Dangerous, in a way. She laughed, the sound light and unsteady. Dangerous? Because you make me think, he said simply, and she felt her cheeks heat again. A few other students passed by, but neither of them looked away. There was an electric tension, a silent agreement forming between them that neither needed words to acknowledge. Hey, she said after a moment, do you always sit alone? He shook his head. Not usually. But sometimes, it's better. His eyes flicked to hers again. Unless there's someone worth sitting with. Chiamaka felt her heart hammering, and she quickly looked down at her tray, trying to act casual. I see, she murmured, though she knew he'd caught the blush rising in her cheeks. They ate in companionable silence, the occasional glance or smirk sending tiny shocks through her chest. The bell rang again, and she realized the moment had passed. Jihoon stood, brushing off his hands. See you in class, he said, though there was a softness in his tone that made her stomach twist. Yes, she replied, her voice breathless. See you. As he walked away, she couldn't stop herself from watching him, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, something like excitement, anticipation, and the beginnings of a crush that threatened to take over her entire day. By the end of the first day, Chiamaka had survived the confusion of the school, the whispers of students, and her own self-doubt. But one thing was certain, she couldn't stop thinking about him. And the next day promised to be even more complicated, more exhilarating, and more electrifying. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to tilt in a way she had never expected. And Jihoon? He had noticed everything about her, the way she laughed, the way she stumbled over Korean words, the spark in her eyes that refused to be dimmed. And he wanted more. Comment below if you think Chiamaka and Jihoon will survive their first real conversation without teasing each other mercilessly. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next, it's only getting hotter from here. The next morning, Chiamaka arrived earlier than usual, determined not to repeat the panic of yesterday. The air outside the school was crisp, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Today, she told herself, she would be confident. Today, she would not stumble. Her determination faltered the moment she spotted him leaning against the school gate, his backpack slung casually over one shoulder, eyes scanning the arriving students as if the whole world was his stage. The way he looked so effortless made her heart skip in that familiar, reckless rhythm. Good morning, she called out before she could stop herself, waving awkwardly. His head snapped toward her, and a slow, teasing smile spread across his face. Morning, Chiamaka. His voice had that smooth, teasing quality that always made her cheeks warm. You're early. Impressive. Someone has to set an example, she shot back, smiling despite the flutter in her stomach. He laughed, a sound that made her ears tingle, and shook his head. Careful, you might make me start expecting punctuality from everyone. She rolled her eyes playfully, feeling a surge of boldness. Good. Let them try. They'll fail. The school bell rang, cutting short their exchange, and they were swept inside with the other students. Chiamaka found herself in class, trying to focus, but she could feel Jihoon's presence like a gravitational pull. Every time she glanced up, his eyes caught hers, a teasing spark in the depths. During the morning break, she found herself once again under the tree where they had eaten yesterday. To her surprise, he appeared almost immediately, dropping beside her with a grin. You're predictable, he said, smirking. Maybe I like being predictable, she replied, a mischievous note in her voice. He leaned closer, and the faint scent of his cologne reached her. Her pulse quickened, and she forced herself to breathe normally. Is that so? He murmured. Or maybe you just like making me wonder what you'll do next. Chiamaka's lips curved into a smile. Maybe a little of both. Jihoon's gaze softened, lingering on her in a way that made her stomach flutter. You're different, he said quietly, almost like a confession. Not like the others. She felt herself blush under the weight of his attention. Different, how? Everything, he said simply. The way you speak, the way you move, the way you make me notice things I didn't think I would. Her heart skipped, and she looked away, pretending to examine her lunch. You notice a lot, don't you? She asked, her voice teasing now. He shrugged, that casual, confident tilt of the shoulders that made her chest tighten. I'm observant, he said, though his eyes twinkled with amusement. And you're impossible to ignore. Chiamaka laughed softly, covering her mouth with her hand. Impossible, huh? I like the sound of that. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden shout from the hallway. A group of students were giggling, pointing in her direction. Chiamaka felt her stomach twist, worried they were laughing at her accent or the way she carried herself. She looked up to see Jihoon's expression change, his eyes darkened slightly, protective and focused. Don't listen to them, he said softly, leaning closer so only she could hear. They don't matter. Her heart skipped a beat at the intimacy of the moment. She wanted to stay there, close to him, but the bell rang again, and reality intruded. Throughout the day, Jihoon found excuses to be near her, walking her to class, answering her questions with playful patience, sharing notes, and occasionally brushing against her shoulder. Every touch, every glance, sent electricity through her veins, and she realized she was thinking about him constantly. By afternoon, Chiamaka was exhausted, not from the lessons or the walking, but from the emotional rollercoaster that was being around Jihoon. When she sat alone in the courtyard, trying to catch her breath, he appeared again, sliding into the bench beside her without a word. You look tired, he observed, his eyes scanning her face with that unnervingly intense attention. I am, she admitted, leaning back. But it's not school. It's you. His smile deepened, and he leaned just a little closer, their shoulders brushing. Me? I don't think I'm that exhausting. Oh, you are, she said, her voice teasing but her heart racing. In the best way. They laughed, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves and distant chatter. For a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them, sitting side by side on that bench, exchanging smiles and unspoken words. You know, Jihoon said, his tone suddenly softer, almost serious, I like this. Just sitting with you. Talking. Seeing you laugh. Chiamaka felt warmth flood her chest. I like it too, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause, heavy and charged. Jihoon's hand brushed hers accidentally. Or maybe intentionally, and the contact made her pulse thunder. She looked up, their eyes locking in a silent, electric understanding. The bell rang again, startling them both. They jumped slightly, breaking the moment, but the tension lingered, a promise of what was to come. As she walked home that evening, Chiamaka couldn't stop thinking about him, replaying every glance, every smile, every brush of skin. Her heart felt lighter, faster, as though it had learned a new rhythm. And Jihoon? He was already planning how he would see her again tomorrow, what he could say, how he could make her laugh, and maybe, just maybe, make her fall a little more for him. The next day promised more stolen moments, teasing glances, and heart-stopping encounters. And somewhere deep inside, both of them knew this was just the beginning. Comment below if you think Jihoon will finally make his move. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because the sparks between them are only going to get hotter. The morning sun streamed through the school windows, painting the classroom in golden light. Chiamaka entered, her backpack slung over one shoulder, heart still fluttering from the thought of Jihoon. She found her usual seat by the window, but before she could sit, a familiar shadow fell across her desk. Good morning, Jihoon said, leaning casually, one arm resting on the edge of her desk. His hair fell slightly into his eyes, and that smirk made her stomach twist. Morning, she replied, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. He tilted his head, eyes scanning her face as if reading every flicker of emotion. You're smiling. Chiamaka felt heat rise to her cheeks. Maybe I am, she said softly, looking down at her notebook. You know, he said, leaning closer, I like it when you smile. Makes everything else in this boring school seem better. She blinked, caught off guard by the intensity in his voice. Her heart pounded. You really think that? Absolutely, he said. His grin widening. Don't believe me? You'll just have to keep proving me wrong. Chiamaka laughed, the sound light but nervous. Is that a challenge? Maybe, he said, leaning just a little closer, their shoulders brushing. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight to her chest. I like challenges. The day dragged on, but every class, every moment, was punctuated by his subtle attention, passing notes under desks, shared glances across the room, playful nudges in the hallway. Each tiny gesture made her pulse race, and she found herself thinking of him constantly. During lunch, she sat under their usual tree, unpacking her food with careful hands. She looked up to see him approaching, carrying his own lunch, his dark eyes fixed on her. "You're early today," she teased, trying to hide her excitement. "Trying to catch you before anyone else does," he said smoothly, sitting beside her. "Seems I'm too late." Chiamaka felt her heart skip. "Too late? For what?" "To steal your attention," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm failing miserably, aren't I?" "You're not failing," she whispered, leaning slightly closer without realizing it. "I've been paying attention to you." He smiled, that slow, confident smile that made her knees feel weak. "Good. Because I've been thinking about you non-stop since yesterday." Chiamaka felt her stomach flip. "You, really?" "Really," he said, his tone softening. "I like being around you. Talking. Laughing. Watching you try to survive this school without losing your cool." She laughed, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I'm not that cool," she said. "You are," he said firmly, leaning in just slightly. "Cool, brave, and impossible to ignore." Her cheeks burned, and she looked down, pretending to adjust her lunch. But when she glanced up, he was still watching her, his gaze intense and focused, like he could see right into her heart. The afternoon classes passed in a blur, but the tension between them remained. Electric and unspoken. Every brush of hands, every shared glance, made her pulse race. By the time the final bell rang, she felt both exhilarated and exhausted, her mind spinning with thoughts of him. As she walked home, she couldn't stop replaying every word, every smile, every moment of connection. She realized she was falling for him harder and faster than she had expected. The next day, Jihoon found her before class, leaning against the wall with that infuriating smirk. "You know," he said, voice low and teasing, "you're getting better at stealing my attention." Chiamaka felt her heart leap. "Better?" she echoed, trying to sound indifferent. "Yeah," he said, leaning closer. "I used to think I was in control, but you're making it hard." Her breath caught, and she looked away, pretending to check her bag. But when she glanced up, he was still there, still watching, still smirking in a way that made her knees go weak. During lunch, they shared a quiet moment under the tree, just the two of them. Jihoon reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering slightly longer than necessary. "You're distracting," he murmured, eyes darkening with a mix of mischief and something softer. "Am I?" she whispered, heart racing. "Yes," he said simply. "But I don't want you to stop." Chiamaka felt a thrill rush through her. She wanted to lean closer, to close the small distance between them, but the world intruded, the distant laughter of students, the bell for the next class. Still, the spark between them burned brighter, unspoken but undeniable. Every glance, every touch, every word was a promise, a teasing hint of what was to come. By the end of the week, their connection had deepened. They exchanged jokes, teasing banter, and fleeting touches that made every heartbeat a little faster. The air between them was thick with tension, and neither could deny the growing attraction. One afternoon, as they sat under the tree sharing snacks, Jihoon leaned closer, his voice low and teasing. "You know, I think we're the only ones who understand each other here." Chiamaka felt her stomach twist. "Maybe," she said softly. "Or maybe we're just drawn together." He grinned, that infuriatingly confident grin. "Drawn together. I like the sound of that." Their hands brushed, fingers accidentally intertwining for a brief moment. Chiamaka's heart raced, and she quickly pulled back, pretending to adjust her notebook. But Jihoon noticed, of course. He smirked knowingly. "You can't hide it," he murmured, voice low and teasing. "I see the way you look at me." Her cheeks burned. Maybe I do," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Good," he said, leaning back just slightly, but his eyes never leaving hers. "Because I feel the same." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, and they were pulled back into the current of students rushing to their next classes. But the moment lingered, heavy and charged, leaving both of them breathless. As Chiamaka walked home that afternoon, her mind replayed every word, every glance, every fleeting touch. She realized she was no longer just curious about Jihoon, she was completely captivated, heart and mind. And somewhere, she knew, he was thinking the same. Comment below if you think they'll finally admit their feelings. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with every heart-stopping moment, they're just getting started. The following morning, Chiamaka walked into the school feeling a little braver. Yesterday's moments with Jihoon kept replaying in her mind, the way his dark eyes lingered on hers, the way his smile made her chest tighten. She had spent the entire evening thinking about him, her heart still skipping with anticipation. As soon as she stepped into the courtyard, she spotted him leaning against the school gate, hands in his pockets, that teasing smirk already in place. He spotted her immediately, and his eyes lit up in that infuriating way that made her knees weaken. "Morning," he called, his voice carrying across the bustling courtyard. "Morning," she replied, quickening her pace toward him, unable to hide the flutter in her chest. "You know," he said as she approached, "I was hoping you'd be early today. I've got something to show you." Chiamaka's curiosity spiked. "Something to show me?" He grinned mysteriously. "Yes. Follow me." Before she could ask more, he turned, walking with that confident, effortless stride that made her want to keep up just to be near him. She followed, heart hammering in her chest. He led her to the school rooftop, a quiet spot far from prying eyes. The city stretched out below them, sunlight glinting off the skyscrapers, casting everything in a warm glow. "Wow," Chiamaka breathed, taking in the view. "It's beautiful." Jihoon smiled, leaning against the railing beside her. "Not as beautiful as you," he said smoothly, and she felt her cheeks flame. She glanced at him, trying to hide her blush. "Stop it," she whispered, though the flutter in her chest betrayed her. "I can't," he said, leaning just slightly closer. "You make it impossible to act normal." Her heart raced as their shoulders brushed. She tried to steady her breath, but the closeness, the warmth, and the intensity of his gaze made it nearly impossible. "So," he said after a moment, a playful glint in his eyes, "what do you think of your first week here?" Chiamaka thought for a moment, then smiled. "Exhausting, exciting, and completely unpredictable." "Unpredictable?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "I like that. Sounds like me." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Maybe. But you're also infuriating." "Infuriating?" His eyes darkened slightly, though the teasing remained. "How so?" "You make my heart race," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Jihoon's eyes softened, and a slow smile spread across his face. "Good," he murmured. "Because you do the same to me." Chiamaka felt a thrill rush through her, and for a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them on that rooftop, the city far below. He leaned slightly closer, and she felt her pulse thunder. "You know," he said, voice low, "I've been thinking about you non-stop. Since the moment I saw you." Her breath caught. "You have?" "Yes," he said simply. "And I can't stop." The words hung between them, charged and electric. Chiamaka felt her cheeks burn, her heart racing in a way that made her dizzy. Before she could respond, the bell rang in the distance, signaling the next class. They jumped slightly, breaking the moment, but neither wanted to move. Jihoon smirked, leaning back against the railing. "We'll finish this conversation later," he said, though his eyes never left hers. Chiamaka nodded, her mind spinning as she walked to class. Every step felt heavy with anticipation, every glance in his direction a reminder of the electric tension between them. That afternoon, she found herself once again under their usual tree, waiting for him. And as if on cue, he appeared, carrying a small notebook. "What's that?" she asked, curiosity piqued. "Just something I wanted to show you," he said, sitting beside her. He opened the notebook, revealing a collection of sketches, some of the school, some of her. Chiamaka gasped softly, recognizing her features in a few of the drawings. "You drew me?" Jihoon shrugged, a faint blush on his cheeks. "I've been inspired by you." Her heart raced, a mixture of surprise and flustered excitement. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said softly, leaning slightly closer. Just keep looking at me like that. Chiamaka laughed nervously, but her eyes lingered on him. The connection between them was undeniable, growing stronger with every stolen glance, every brush of hands, every shared smile. The bell rang again, but they didn't move immediately. Jihoon's hand brushed hers lightly, sending a jolt through her that made her heart thunder. You're impossible to resist, he murmured, voice low, teasing but sincere. I could say the same about you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a long moment, they just sat there, shoulders touching, eyes locked, each heartbeat a promise of what was to come. As she walked home that evening, Chiamaka's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She replayed every moment, every word, every glance. She realized she was completely captivated, drawn to him in a way that terrified and thrilled her at the same time. And somewhere, Jihoon was thinking the same, planning the next moment he could see her, tease her, and make her heart race all over again. Comment below if you think Jihoon will finally make a bold move. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chiamaka and Jihoon's story is only getting more intense, and you won't want to miss a single moment. The next morning, Chiamaka was late. Not by much, but enough to feel the familiar spike of panic in her chest. She hurried across the courtyard, clutching her bag, scanning for any sign of Jihoon. And of course, there he was leaning casually against the school gate, arms crossed, that infuriatingly calm smirk in place. You're late, he said, voice teasing, though there was a glint in his eyes that made her pulse race. I had a lot to do this morning, she stammered, cheeks flushing. Excuses? He asked, eyebrow raised. I'll have to come up with a punishment for that. Her stomach twisted in a mixture of nerves and excitement. Punishment? Yes, he said, stepping closer, his dark eyes locked onto hers. Something personal. Chiamaka swallowed hard. Oh no, she muttered, feeling the tension in the air spike. Jihoon leaned in just slightly, close enough for her to notice the faint scent of his cologne, the heat radiating off him. Don't worry, he whispered, voice low, teasing. You might enjoy it. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. Maybe I will, she admitted, barely above a whisper. He smirked, that teasing glint dancing in his eyes. Good. I like your honesty. Class passed slowly that morning, with every glance between them charged with unspoken electricity. Every time their hands brushed while passing a notebook or exchanging a pen, her pulse jumped. It was maddening, thrilling, and addictive all at once. During lunch, they sat under their usual tree, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, casting dappled patterns over them. Jihoon leaned back casually, though his eyes never left hers. You know, he said after a moment, I could get used to this. Get used to what? She asked, trying to sound indifferent, though her heart raced. Seeing you, he replied simply, his voice softening. Every day, like this. Her chest tightened, and she felt herself leaning just a little closer. I like it too, she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. A faint blush colored his cheeks, and for a brief moment, he seemed almost vulnerable. Good, he murmured. Because I was hoping you would. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden gust of wind, scattering papers from her notebook across the courtyard. They both lunged to catch them, hands brushing repeatedly as they picked up the flying pages. Careful, he teased, though there was a warmth in his tone that made her pulse race. You're going to make me fall for you before we even finish lunch. Chiamaka laughed, a light, nervous sound. I think you already have. Jihoon's eyes darkened slightly, and he leaned closer, just enough for her to feel the heat radiating from him. Maybe, he said softly. But I don't regret it. Her heart thundered. She wanted to lean closer, to close the tiny gap between them, but the world intruded, the distant laughter of students, the approaching bell. Same time tomorrow, he asked suddenly, voice low and teasing, like a challenge. Chiamaka smiled. Heart racing. Same time, she agreed. The rest of the day passed in a blur, with every stolen glance, every subtle touch, every teasing word making her heart beat faster. She realized she was completely captivated, addicted to the tension, to the thrill, to him. By the time she walked home, her thoughts were a whirlwind of anticipation and excitement. She couldn't stop thinking about him, couldn't stop replaying their moments together. That evening, she received a text from him. "Thinking about you. Can't wait for tomorrow." Her chest tightened, a rush of warmth flooding her as she stared at the message. She typed back quickly, unable to hide her excitement. "Me too. Don't make me wait." Jihoon's reply came almost instantly. "I'll be there. Don't worry." The next day, as she approached the tree, she spotted him waiting, notebook in hand, that teasing smirk dancing across his face. "Ready for another round?" he asked, voice low, teasing. Chiamaka felt a thrill run through her. "Always," she replied, smiling. They sat together, leaning close, exchanging playful banter, soft laughter, and fleeting touches that made every heartbeat a little faster. Every brush of hands, every shared glance, every teasing smile built the tension between them, creating a magnetic pull neither could resist. At one point, Jihoon leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You know," he said, "I think I might be falling for you." Chiamaka's breath caught. "You, what?" she whispered, heart racing. "I said I might be falling for you," he repeated, eyes darkening, voice low and intense. "And I can't stop thinking about it, or about you." Her cheeks burned, and she felt a rush of warmth that left her breathless. I think I might feel the same," she admitted softly. Jihoon's lips curved into a triumphant smirk. "Good," he murmured, leaning just slightly closer. "Because I plan on seeing this through." The bell rang, but neither moved immediately. Their eyes locked, charged with electricity, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. As she walked home, Chiamaka's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, anticipation, and the undeniable pull of attraction. She realized she was completely captivated by him, and somewhere deep inside, she knew he felt the same. Comment below if you think Chiamaka and Jihoon will finally share their first real kiss. And don't forget to like and subscribe, you won't want to miss a single heart-stopping moment of their romance. The morning sun spilled across the courtyard, warm and golden, but Chiamaka barely noticed it. Her mind was occupied, thinking about the previous day and the lingering intensity of Jihoon's words. She could feel her pulse quickening just imagining him leaning closer, the heat of his gaze, the softness of his voice. She hurried across the school grounds, and there he was leaning casually against the gate, arms crossed, smirk in place, dark eyes sparkling with mischief. "Morning," he called, voice smooth and teasing. "Morning," she replied, heart hammering. "You're early. Trying to catch you before you get away," he said, tilting his head. "Seems I didn't quite succeed." Chiamaka felt her chest flutter. "Trying to catch me?" she asked, teasing back. He stepped closer, just slightly, so that the distance between them seemed charged with electricity. "Yes," he murmured. "And I think you like being caught." Her cheeks burned, and she laughed softly, unable to hide her excitement. "Maybe I do," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Jihoon's eyes darkened, intense and teasing at once. "Good," he said, leaning just a little closer. "Because I don't plan on letting you go anytime soon." The day passed in a blur of stolen glances and subtle touches. Every time their hands brushed over a notebook, every time their eyes met across the classroom, Chiamaka felt a thrill shoot through her. By lunchtime, she could barely contain her excitement as she approached the tree where they always met. Jihoon was already there, notebook in hand, smirk teasing and eyes dark with intensity. "Late?" he asked, though the twinkle in his eyes betrayed amusement rather than reprimand. "Fashionably late," she replied, sliding onto the bench beside him. He leaned close, their shoulders brushing. "I like that," he murmured. "You're unpredictable, in the best way." Chiamaka laughed softly, heart racing. "And you're infuriatingly confident." "I'll take that as a compliment," he said, his voice dropping slightly, low and intimate. "Because I've been thinking about you, non-stop." Her stomach fluttered, and she felt herself leaning slightly toward him. I think about you too," she admitted, heart hammering. Jihoon's gaze softened, and he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered just long enough to make her pulse thunder. "You know," he said softly, I could stay here with you forever and not get bored. Chiamaka's breath caught. Forever, she whispered, feeling the weight of the moment. Yes, he said, leaning just slightly closer, their faces inches apart. Just like this, with you. The world seemed to shrink around them, the sound of students in the distance, the rustle of leaves, the gentle breeze, it all faded until it was just the two of them, hearts racing in tandem. A sudden gust of wind sent a few loose leaves fluttering across the bench. Jihoon's hand brushed hers as they both reached to catch them. The touch lingered, fingers grazing, sending jolts of electricity through her. Chiamaka's eyes widened, and she felt her breath catch. Jihoon, she murmured, voice soft, heart hammering. His lips curved into a slow, teasing smile. Yes, he whispered, leaning ever so slightly closer, their noses nearly touching. Her pulse thundered. She wanted to close the gap, to feel his lips against hers, but the world intruded, someone's laughter in the distance. But there was something softer underneath it, something that made her chest tighten. Morning, he said, voice low, almost intimate. Morning, she replied, heart hammering, cheeks warm. He stepped closer, close enough that the warmth radiating from him made her knees weak. Ready, he asked, tone teasing but charged with something deeper. For what? She asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. He tilted his head, eyes glinting. To see how far we can go. Her pulse thundered in her ears. I think I'm ready, she whispered. Class dragged on, but every glance, every brush of hands, every subtle smile kept her on edge. By lunch, she could barely contain herself as she walked to their usual tree, heart racing like a drum. Jihoon was already there, notebook in hand, but it was forgotten as soon as he spotted her. He stood, smirk playful but eyes dark with intensity, and offered his hand. Chiamaka took it without thinking, her heart fluttering at the warmth of his touch. Ready? He asked softly. For this, she whispered. He leaned in, close enough that she could feel his breath on her cheek. Yes. For this, he said, voice low and teasing. For us. Her chest tightened, and she leaned slightly toward him. I've been waiting for this, she admitted, heart hammering. Jihoon smiled softly, the smirk replaced by something warmer, something real. Me too, he whispered. For a moment, they just sat there, foreheads nearly touching, eyes locked. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the electric connection, the heartbeat shared between them. Then, with a gentle courage, Jihoon leaned closer, brushing his lips against hers in a soft, tentative kiss. Chiamaka's eyes widened, and her breath caught. The kiss was light, teasing, full of unspoken promises, and it sent her pulse racing like never before. She responded instinctively, leaning closer, wrapping her hands lightly around his arms. The world fell away, and the only thing that existed was him. The warmth of his body, the softness of his lips, and the thrill of finally giving in to the tension that had been building for days. When they finally pulled back slightly, both of them were breathless, foreheads still touching. Jihoon's eyes glimmered with amusement and tenderness. You're incredible, he whispered, voice low and full of emotion. Chiamaka's cheeks burned, heart pounding. You're amazing, she whispered back, voice shaky with excitement and awe. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, just breathing and savoring the closeness. Every heartbeat seemed to echo the connection between them, every glance a silent promise. Tomorrow, Jihoon said finally, a teasing grin returning, we'll see how far we can go next. Chiamaka laughed softly, leaning against him. I think I'm ready for anything, she said, her voice full of anticipation and warmth. The bell rang faintly in the distance, reminding them of reality, but neither moved immediately. They stood together slowly, hands brushing, fingers entwining naturally, walking back into the flow of students with hearts still racing, minds still wrapped around the intensity of their first kiss. As Chiamaka walked home, replaying every detail of the afternoon, she couldn't stop smiling. She realized she had fallen completely, irreversibly, for him, for the moments, for the thrill of every interaction, for the undeniable chemistry that bound them together. And Jihoon? He was thinking the same, already planning the next moment, the next stolen glance, the next whispered word, the next heartbeat racing encounter that would keep her and himself completely captivated. The story of Chiamaka and Jihoon was just beginning, full of promise, tension, and undeniable romance. Every day brought new flirtations, new confessions, and new moments that made hearts pound and breaths catch. Comment below if you think their story will get even more intense, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because this romance is only heating up, and you won't want to miss a single heartbeat. Share to your friends so they will be part of us.